Now I will note that this does not follow CFMoto's recommended timeline for maintenance, but we run this primarily in the desert at high speeds, so I would definitely classify this as severe use. At 500 miles, I changed the diff oil, front and rear, engine oil, lube the chassis, and clean the air filter. It's very important to note that I clean the air filter and lube the chassis every 100 miles. Again, I have very severe conditions here. We run 50, 60 miles an hour most of the time, and it's very dusty and very hot here. Let's get started. All right, every time I pull the tires off this thing, I like to feel the wheel bearing play. I don't know if you guys have seen my previous video, but I already did a video replacing the rear wheel bearings with automotive units, and I just like to feel them, make sure they don't need replaced again. So I just grab the top of the tire and push it in. There's a tiny bit of play, but this is not enough for me to be concerned. I just like doing this. That way it doesn't sneak up on you, you're out on the trail and suddenly your wheel bearing is falling apart. To get to your air filter, we're gonna remove this bolt and this bolt down here. They're both 10 millimeters. And then we'll undo all these clips. As you can see, I have the Uni filter, a strongly recommended upgrade, especially in dusty conditions. We'll go ahead and pull it off, wash it, and then I'll clean the inside of the air box. All right, I prefer to do this in a garage sink, but I don't have a garage sink at this house. So we'll just do it in the kitchen sink. My wife isn't home, it's perfect. So take the outer cover off the filter. They sell special products for this. I've found that Dawn works better than pretty much all of them. You can see it's really pulling out a lot of that grime. I can tell I'm pretty much done when the water is coming out clean, and then the filter is pretty much a uniform color. It's kind of hard to tell with the shadows, but it's all pretty similar red. Next we'll do the inner filter. This one's a little bit harder to do because there's a spring inside. So just take a bunch of dish soap, rub it on the outside, and I just give it a couple good washes and a really good rinse until you're not getting any more suds or oil coming out when you're rinsing it. And make sure you check the inside too. You're not going to be able to see, but it's just water. It's not sudsing up. Let's go out back to the garage. All right, what we're going to do now is just clean the inside of the air box. I already took the lid off and cleaned it. So this is about as clean as you should get it. It doesn't need to be perfect, but you might as well. This is how it looked like before. The cover's a little easier because you can just pull it off and wash it with a hose. But here, we'll just take some simple green and careful not to get into the intake itself. Just clean out the inside. All right, next thing we want to do is drain the oil. I like to make sure that the engine is clean, especially around the fill hole, because I'm going to remove the fill plug first and then drain the oil. And you don't have to remove it completely, as long as it's giving it room to breathe is fine. All right, to remove the drain plug is just a 17 millimeter. Awesome. I really hate that. But what can you do? Now we can go ahead and change out the oil filter. There's 3 8 millimeter bolts. Once you get your old filter and O-ring out, just go ahead and clean with a brand new paper towel. That way it gives you some time to put it back together without getting everything oily. Very important to use a brand new paper towel. Then we'll slide the new filter on. Because it's too big. Just barely snug up the first screw and then we'll run the other two in. Be very certain that your O-ring is sitting properly in the groove. This cover should be sitting flush against the engine. All right, you don't necessarily need a funnel with the hose, but if you're gonna use a regular funnel, you have to remove the center panel between the two seats. I find this to be a little more time-saving. Make sure you're using JSO approved oil because of the wet clutch, otherwise you will start slipping your clutch. And it takes 3.1 quarts or something like that. If you are using a hose, it's gonna take a little while. Just be patient. All right, after you've filled it up and ran the engine for a little bit just to get oil pressure, fill up the oil filter. We can go ahead and check the level. So pull out the dipstick, wipe it down. And then to measure, to be sure you're not underfilling, you measure with the dipstick unthreaded. As you can see, the oil level with 3 quarts is pretty much perfect. Once we're done with the oil change, we can go ahead and grease the chassis. We'll start with the rear. We'll go onto the sway bar. And I just go till I see some come out. There we go. Then down here, this might be tricky. A little bit came out. A little trouble hooking onto this one. There we go. Kinking the crap out of it. As you go, you'll want to clean off the excess grease, because otherwise it just attracts a bunch of dust and grime. It doesn't have to be perfect, but dang it. Now while this lock and lube is really nice, it's not really necessary to do the car. It just makes uncoupling it a lot easier. What I think is necessary, I don't even know who makes this. I got it at Tractor Supply. But as you can see, it's like a little side mount. So then you can come in here. Oh, come on. Is it broken? Oh, nope, it's going. Okay. Doesn't normally make this much of a mess, but it still gets the job done, and they're very cheap. So we'll make sure to hit this top one, and then the bottom grease zerk, and then we'll move on to the front. And we'll do the last one on the rear. Obviously you have to do both sides, but this is the last one per side. All right, luckily the front's a lot easier. There's actually only 2 grease points per side. One on the inner part of the upper control arm and one on the inner part of the lower control arm. And that's all there really is to greasing the chassis. I like doing it immediately after washing it. I don't know if the camera caught it, but on some of the bushings, when it was actually pushing out the grease, it pushed out a little bit of water first from power washing it. So I'll wash it and then immediately afterwards grease it. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and do the diffs. I always start by undoing the fill plug first, because if you undo the drain plug and then strip out the fill plug, you're in for a really bad time. Now, as you may have noticed, all the oils we're changing are really clean. But like I said, we're running this in very severe conditions. I think it's much cheaper to spend a couple bucks on oil every 500 miles and make sure the machine's gonna last a lot longer than waiting the required intervals and then having something fail. And before you reinstall your drain plug, make sure you clean the little magnet. Something really nice about these CFMotos is every single drain plug has a magnet in it. Now that we have the drain plug installed, we can go ahead and fill up the diff. And you're just gonna go till it comes out. As you can see, it's full now. We can go ahead and reinstall the fill plug. Now let's move to the front. And the front diff's basically the same procedure. Just start with the fill plug.
Wow!
That could have gone badly for your camera.
Yeah! I just saw my life back here.
And again, while it's draining, we'll go ahead and clean the drain plug. All right, in the front, I like to use a hose. Gives me a little bit more room. All right, after it's filled a little bit, we can go ahead and put the fill plug back in. All right, last thing we're gonna do is go ahead and oil this filter. Look up here for the video I did on how to clean and oil your air filters, and then we'll get this installed. Once it's all oiled up, we can go ahead and install the filter. And tighten up this clamp. Now we can reinstall the breather hose and reinstall the filter cover. All right, and the very last step is install this cover, and you're good to go. All right, so that's everything I do to my Z-Force every 500 miles, and every 100 miles I lube the chassis and clean the air filter. I know it might seem a little bit over the top, but I want to make sure it stays very reliable when I'm using out in the middle of nowhere. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.